Mr Agnew has the floor, and then Frau Jäggle.
Chairman, thank you. I'm a little bit surprised to be the first to be called. Just a couple of things I'd like to say in response to Mrs. Paulsen. She said no one wants to return to the heyday of border controls. Well, here's somebody who does. And I'm thinking particularly about rabies. We haven't seen rabies in the United Kingdom for many, many years. It is spreading towards our shores from Eastern Europe. It is pretty relentless. And it's a most unpleasant disease in dogs and, of course, in human beings. And I would certainly like the right to be able to make absolutely sure that nobody is hiding a dog in their luggage. It's really quite easy to do. So I just want to point out that, as usual, I'm going to be in a fly in the ointment here. The other thing I want to mention is African swine fever, and I'm really disappointed that José Bové has left the room, because this is a disease that's spreading westwards from Asia. Now, in our country, we have developed a treatment for it. Well done, the British scientists. However, they had to use genetic modification or genetic engineering in order to do it, and they are not allowed to take this any further because of the EU, and in particular, the Green Lobby in the EU. And I so wish that José was here to respond to that. Thank you.
Grazie, Agnew.
Thank you, Mr Agnew. Frau Jäggle, then Mr Smith.
I can understand that, of course, we are living in a world with open borders. You've referred to African swine fever, Mr Agnew, but when you look at avian influenza and so on, you know, then diseases come to us through the air, so borders are not much help. We do need to think of how we in the European Union can come up with a sensible, science-based response to these animal diseases. And thinking of the UK, of course, there's not just the problem of rabies, there's a problem of badgers, and that is a big problem, Mr Agnew. It's a problem that has been discussed in my office on a number of occasions, and we have many other similar issues to deal with. So I don't think we can just say, you know, that's your problem and that's your problem. I think we have to see how we can resolve these working together. And I'd like to say once again, thank you to Ms. Paulsen and
Director of this, Bernard von Goethem. You've the floor, sir.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, let me thank Mrs. Paulsen for the huge work which she has done so far. When members have talked about rabies spreading through the EU or other disease spreading to the EU, everybody, I think, has to be reminded of the efficient way the Commission and the Member States have been able to fight disease and to keep disease in restricted area over the last year. May I remind all the members the outbreak of foot-and-mouth disease in the UK in 2001. Very few outbreaks due to our regionalization policy occurred outside that zone. And we have applied the same principles since a long time. So we want to keep disease in the area where they have occurred and to fight against them. Now, the draft opinion.
I completely understand that British approach. I am Swedish, and I'm under quite a lot of pressure from back home to uphold border controls. So I do understand you. But we simply must strike a balance with our need for a functioning market, because we're still in the midst of an economic crisis with frighteningly high levels of unemployment. So we need to spur growth. However, in my proposal, I also find that there are special circumstances under which some of our member states with borders, for example, up to Eastern Europe, and getting some special support in trying to control those borders and the spread of disease across them. That is very important. But I do think we need to strike the right balance. And now, Mr. Agnew, go ahead.
Thank Thank you. I'd like to follow up what the Spanish MEP was talking about a little earlier in the debate, about the grey area. She said there wasn't a proper Spanish interpretation for it. I think she's quite right, and I can see a real minefield here of confusion and ambiguity. Because actually, I think there are 4 different categories of animals. 2 are very easy to define. Those that are farmed or domesticated, an individual farmer or an owner is responsible for that cat, that dog, that cow, that pig, and everybody knows where they are. That's straightforward. Right at the other end of the scale, you have the wild animals, foxes, badgers, etc., hares. These are wild. Again, we all know where we are. But it's the categories in between that are more difficult, because I think there are 2. One of them is what we call feral. This is where a domesticated animal has actually escaped into the wild. So there you would look at dogs or mink. These should have been domesticated, but they've become wild. Then you've what I would describe as the parallel species. These are species of animals that exist as farmed animals and also in the wild. Deer, rabbits, salmon, and in the case of my country, United Kingdom, ponies, because in the New Forest we have a wild population of ponies. So there is a real prospect of a big muddle here, trying to define these different categories. I hope that that is taken on board. Now, the other thing one of the speakers mentioned was antibiotics. And thank you for mentioning the big drop there has been. Many of us here, MEPs in this room, will routinely get mail for constituents saying factory farmers pump their animals full of antibiotics. And I can assure them that we don't. I wouldn't say I'm a factory farmer, but I have a lot of animals under my control. I have to get a veterinary prescription to use antibiotics, and he must be convinced that there is a disease on my unit that requires their use. I'm also a member of an assurance scheme, and they will not allow me to use antibiotics in a prophylactic way, a preventative way. So I hope we can use this debate to put some of these fears to rest. Thank you.
There are no further requests for the floor. And so I would now like to ask Mr. Vågsholm, Professor Vågsholm, to answer the questions put to him. Go ahead.
The second question about antibiotics, and I was glad the UK colleague brought it up. I cannot read your name on the screen, so I apologize for. But I fully agree, and I think progress is being made, and I think what you can state is that more progress is needed, as this is a very serious concern, and hopefully this piece of legislation can be, let's say, the basis for a similar success story as we had previously on the control of mad cow disease, which I would like to call a success story today. And hopefully it's not a reversible success story. Thank you, Madam Chair.
The UK MEP mentioned that rabies may come back. It is, unfortunately, a very serious disease. And it is successfully it's being successfully dealt with across Europe, and in Poland we have also vaccinations in the border region in Ukraine, so that this serious disease does not cross the border. And I think we should be also thinking about our neighbors in this respect, because those countries, the neighbor countries, have to be included in our thinking.
Yes, go ahead.
Anyone disagreed or agreed, and I have to agree with you about the differing standards and attitudes to animal welfare across the European Union. And Mrs. Jeggle, she is here still, she was talking about badgers in the UK, where probably the animal rights lobby is the strongest and is most vocal against the culling of badgers and the in the fight against bovine TB, and we go to other parts of the European Union where animal welfare is very low on the agenda. And I feel this is one of the reasons why it's so difficult to have a common agricultural policy. Thank you.